All right, day two of our workflows. You saw where we spent about, in the average, between 45 minutes to actually get a set of clubs together, right? By checking all the components, making sure everything's right, checking frequencies, all those different things. Now we've got to finish them. There's where the rubber meets the road. Now, I put a lot of golf clubs together yesterday, and what we're doing is we're making sure all the glue is hard and cured, and it is. So we're good with that. I will tell you that I did find out that the epoxy does have a shelf life, and I found it because I had a tube that was just under 2 years old, and it came out in a color that I've never seen before. So I brought out a tube that was literally a month old and totally different color. So I threw the other stuff away, and we now have, you're using the newer tube so we don't have failures. And that was on our tour van experience, the one that where the glue dries, the DP810. So if you're going to go through this stuff, because this glue is not cheap, you want to make sure that your usage is going to meet with your stock. Okay. So now we're talking about workflow again. Now we're talking about the finishing. I've already done a couple of sets just to clear the space, just like we did when we got started. And now we're talking about getting them dirty side. So this time we went from all the Mizunos. Now we're going to do some Wilsons. Wilsons, these have graphite shafts. And we're going to use some techniques, but the idea here is the flow. Number one is on the shelf or on the floor, I put the piece of tape on it. I always put the piece of tape on it just to protect the shaft, okay? And there's a certain way that I work, and this is the way that when you go to set up your shop, that you want to take that in consideration. Number one is the machinery that you have. I've got a lot of machines, right? I've got a cutoff wheel, which you cannot see. I got a drill press, which you cannot see. Maybe I've got an 8-inch jet tool. They make 6 inches, probably a little bit better. But this thing has never failed me yet. And a couple of dual-setted motors with belts and wheels on them. Now I also got a puller for repairs, but that's a different topic altogether. So what do? Well, number one is I've got to get my ferrules cleaned up. Then what I want to do is I want to measure the length to make sure that I have the final length. That's just like a carpenter's rule, right? Measure twice, cut once. We really want to do that because length is paramount when it comes to a golf club. Then once we get this done, we want to start cleaning up our ferrules, shine them up, address. If I'm using steel shafts, I will dress up the end that I just cut on the sanding block here, or the sanding belt, in order to get that. Then I turn around and we'll see that, and then we go into gripping, and then it's just like a flow. It goes like this. It goes into a figure 8 for me when I get going. So I want to do this. I wanted to talk through this one since it's my last set. The last one kind of went fast, and I was showing you the idea, but this one, since there's more technique based, all right, that we'll talk through it. So let's get started. I'm gonna put in some earplugs. Maybe. Oh, here we go. Earplugs, and we'll get started. Okay, we're revisiting day 2 of our workflow on how to build a golf club, mostly because batteries ran out on the microphones, and I was doing all kinds of talking and no sound. But the workflow is the same. I had a whole bunch of clubs again this weekend, and we're going to go through the same evolution. So what you saw at the beginning is in every instance, you're going to check your work, right? You check your work at almost every stop to make sure that when you're done, right? The last little check should be nothing more than a polish, and you're on your way. Meaning, what does that mean? Well, at the end of the gluing, and you're checking for drying, we put that tape on there so we don't have any ferrule creep. The club didn't want to hydraulically push itself out of the hosel or any of that stuff that makes a bad product, and it really looks bad. And so when we take our tape off and we're putting it around the bottom of the ferrule, we're looking to make sure that that bond, or that bottom of that ferrule and the top of the hosel, are still married up together, okay? Then we got to go into ferrule prepping. Now, you guys can go into the library of the videos. I have several hundred now, and talk about ferrule finishing. There are some that you can do by hand, some that you do by the machine. But since we have a lot to do, I'm going to do it by the machine. Now, as we use this, it's a 1x42 belt running at 1800 RPM. I use a felt belt. As you can see, it's black now. They used to be blue. And what you do is I use that that guide or that stand and holder to hold the golf club, and I rotate the club slowly into the belt, and I let the belt do the work. I don't need to be doing the work on this. That's that job, right? It's the belt's job. And what it does, it provides a very nice, smoother transition, albeit is very dull, okay? And so you got to get it in there, and you've got to get it to where you think that the end of that ferrule and the end of that hosel, again, are married up now, not end to end, but side to side. And that's when you see me rubbing against to figure out that that's happening. Now that, I'm going to tell you again, I've said it 100 times, this is a test. If you know a club maker is coming into your house, that's the very first thing they're going to go to is check that transition to make sure it's nice and smooth, because it's an old-time check on the quality or the give a damn of that club maker in order to produce a very good golf club. All right, so we go through all this. Now, you can use something else. Yeah, well, there's cotton belts, which can do the job and probably do a little bit faster. However, if the ends of the belts tend to curl up, then it can cause a cutting section, particularly in graphite, of which we don't want. I just eliminate that problem by using the felt belt. All right, next thing that we do is, now that we've got this thing in a satiny kind of finish, we really need to shine it back up, because the ferrule needs to be shiny in a lot of cases. How do I do that? That is with acetone. I take paper towels, and you see as I cut them into about 3-inch squares, it's just basically cutting them into quarters, really. And I get a generous helping of acetone on there, and then what I do is I rub back and forth in the opposite direction, or the 90-degree direction that I was turning the ferrule. Why is that? Well, because acetone softens up the ferrule, and it gets it to where you can remove some of those bumps, or those, we'll call impurities, or some of those ridges that may have been caught up in the felt belt, and you can get rid of them. Can also do that last finishing touch of making that transition smooth. Now, once we got that done, we want to, this is where you could stop right here, okay? You could stop right here. However, I have found that there's this stuff called Glanzwatch, and it's a yellow polish. It's the stuff that they use to protect guitars with. And I've been using it ever since I figured it out. I've been using it because it gives another protective coating on this ferrule, and it also polishes the very last part of it off. So you get this ultimate shine ferrule that's very smooth and very, very, very clean when it's all said and done. So we go through that, and we go and just go against the wheel ever so slightly, because we don't need to lean into this one, and polish off all the ferrules. Then what we do is we wipe it off. Now, if you've noticed, at the end of each one of these trials, or each one of these steps, I'm looking at the golf club very intently to make sure that I'm not creating a problem, or I'm not trying to find if there's any other the abnormalities that might be on here. As we see, I found one, and I had to scrape a little excess glue away in order for this thing to look normal. Okay, now we got all that taken care of. Now we have to make them the right length. Okay, this is one of the most paramount steps in all of the club making, is having the right length, because length is equal to consistency. How do we do that? Well, there's two different methods. One, you can do it by putting everything at the 60-degree angle and measuring it and marking it off. Why do I say 60 degree? Because that's what the USGA says. All right, USGA says measured at a 60-degree angle, and then that's how you get all your stuff. However, not every golf club is 60 degrees. So there's another chicken or egg in golf club making. So what do? I measure it in the playing position. So I put it in I have an AccuMade ruler. You can get those at Golf Mechanics. And what you do is you put the golf club in the playing position using another tool to make sure you're lining up the score lines, coming back to the length that you need, mark it. Basically, it's that simple. All right. Now, questions come up, well, what do you do when you get down into the wedges? Sometimes in the past I've made all the wedges the same length with the idea of making them heavier in order to get through the turf more. However, I've kind of abandoned that idea and I've gone to 1/4 increments all the way down, mostly because I'm following the head weight for more consistent swing weights now. Okay, so it's kind of a philosophical change in that. Then we got to actually, now that we've got all the marking done, we got to do the cutting, right? We got to do the cutting. And I'm using a cutoff wheel, and I've had a few guys send me emails. I got this at Golfworks. Now this is an older generation model. However, they used to sell one that was tilted 90 degrees. I went looking, they don't have that model anymore, okay? What they do have is they're kind of using my double arbor motor concept, and they have a 1x42 belt on one side and a cutting wheel on the other. If you don't like that, and it may be a little bit too insecure for you, they have one that has a slide on it, all right? Another very easy and very inexpensive option is a chop saw. All right, you can get a very small chop saw with a grit blade and just come down and hold it and just come down on it. Actually, that would be a preferred method. I just have this one. All right, so you can keep that one in mind, and it will cut both graphite and steel and cut them very, very clean. All right. So the last part of this is part of the build. The build part is the grip. All right. When we do a grip, what you have to do is we have our grips. We measure our grips in our way, as you guys saw in the first part, and we have them aligned. Now what we really want to do there is we're going to take the grip, and what we're doing is we're marking for limits. Right? We don't want to go beyond these limits, because if the stuff sticks out, then you're going to be cleaning it up again. So you go up to your line, and I always use the width of one of my fingers as the end in order to make sure I have enough to fold over. Then what we'll do is you put your finger over the weep hole, squeeze a little bit on the end. You don't need to fill it up all the way, but at least half I would suggest. Get it nice and coated. Let it fall out of the weep holes. We're trying to stay neat here, right? Put your finger back over that weep hole and push it back onto you feel it seat. This will come off. Now the big thing here is alignment. This just happens to be a lefty club, of which Mrs. McGolf doesn't like doing. She puts on more golf clubs or more golf grips than I do. Seat it. Make sure it's in a good alignment. Get my towel back out. And then wipe down the grip so it'll dry off and be nice and tacky. Now we do that, and how we go about doing that, you saw it, how we go about doing that. That was pretty stupid. So we get in there, you make your line. You get up to it. Now the big thing here is you want to fold it over so you don't have any wrinkles. All right. Now typically I would do all the tape first and I would do all the grip second, because I don't want to get any solvent on me, because it's really hard to manage the tape. I'm doing this so that you guys can see the installation of a grip. Okay, put that on there. Now you'll see some folks, they will grab it and they'll push it on and try and use both hands. And it works, except for now you're just asking for a whole bunch of solvent to come squirting on you, and hence the reason for the apron. Okay. And there we go. Alrighty. So the last bit of this that we have to do is we have to check our work. Right? We do total weights after it's all been assembled. We'll do swing weights to make sure that we're consistent, right? And then we'll do loft and lie checks in order to make sure that what we give the customer is exactly what we told them that they needed. And total weight's exactly what you see here. Swing weights on a swing weight scale, and loft and lie is done on a loft and lie machine. Could you use a gauge? Yeah, but if you have to adjust it, you might as well have it in the machine. And that's how we go that. So that's putting together a golf club in its entirety. You saw one which we measured them all up 2 was about technique and process, and then the very last step is checking your own work. That, like I said before, the QA process in this never stops, right? Never stops. That way you can be very, very sure of yourself that you're giving that golfer the best that you can deliver. All right, if you got any more questions on this, put them in the show notes below. And as always, hit that like and subscribe. Yeah, it's not where I was at, right? Hit that like and subscribe. And as always, let's see your scores go low.